The gentleman from Florida, Mr. Donalds, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Panel, yeah, long day. You guys been here a minute, man. I'll give you that. A couple things. Obviously, the economic issues, threat, however you want to categorize it, with China are extensive. And as a nation, we have a lot of work to do, a lot of work. One of those areas of focus of mine and frankly for our country should be in the energy space. As we've learned over the last year, it's critical that the U.S. really strengthens its domestic energy supply. And strengthening our energy supply is probably the biggest investment we can make in our economy. The second biggest, I would argue, largely comes out of this committee with financial regulation and the regulatory environment. On Thursday, I'm introducing legislation that is called the Protect American Energy from China Act. This legislation will prohibit federal funds from being used to implement a memorandum of understanding signed in 2011 by the Department of Energy and the Chinese Academies of Sciences. The MOU addresses the sharing of information, equipment, personnel, et cetera. Mr. Ashu, could you speak to the importance of protecting the integrity of the U.S. Energy sector, why that's critical to our economy?
I can, Congressman. Thank you for the question. I don't think we've come near energy today, so this is an important one to touch upon. Speaking from an export control perspective, it's worthy to remind the committee that the Department of Energy is one of the regular members of the interagency that approves all licenses, and that is important for two reasons. One is there's a lot of fairly standard ideas around energy, but there's a lot happening in the emerging space. And it's really critical that we get our licensing right, that we protect what we need to protect, and that we allow collaboration where it makes sense for American innovation. So in that respect, as a technology-driven industry sector, it's important that we get that balance right.
All right, no, I appreciate that, Mr. Fetto. I mean, you guys can all comment however you feel about it. This is kind of the free-for-all time of this committee. You can kind of do what you want. So if anybody else wanted to comment, I think you can go right ahead. That's fine.
I would just say our investment screening tool, CFIUS, frequently looks at energy-related investments to ensure the technology that Mr. Eshu referred to is protected and doesn't fall in the wrong hands.
I'm going to tackle this from a slightly different angle. I agree with my colleagues, and I think that there are, again, these restrictions and things that we need to put in place. But on the other hand, the other thing we need to be doing is unleashing American energy exports around the world. That is good for our economy. And so I do think that in addition to restricting where we need to restrict, we do need to think about where China is a market that can benefit our economy and take advantage of that. Because again, Chinese purchases of U.S. products is subsidization for U.S. innovation.
Agreed. Real quick, Mr. Lorb, I got a question for you in particular. You know, obviously we have a lot of businesses that do a lot of very various things in China. What are some of the best ways you think that we can protect American businesses from, you know, covert espionage, the CCP, IP theft, and, you know, really weaponization against our businesses with shell companies here in the U.S.?
It's a great question, and there are multiple sort of ways to think through it. Now, first and foremost, obviously companies have an obligation to protect themselves, or at least most of them do, right? But I think beyond that, there's a twofold answer to it. One is in situations where you think there is or is likely to be intellectual property theft or some type of corporate espionage, so on and so forth, U.S. government having the appropriate tools to say to the Chinese, that's not acceptable, and we will sanction you, we'll designate an entity or whatever it may be as a result. On the question, I think, which is a little bit different of the shell companies that you mentioned at the end, I mean, the United States it is in sort of the mid-level stages of putting into place an effective and robust system to understand who is behind front-end shell companies that have registered in the United States. And once that is fully implemented, which should happen hopefully within the next year or two, I think that will be an equally impactful way to prevent exploitation of U.S. markets.
Well, expand on that thought a little bit. We're in the middle of the game and actually figuring out how to ferret this stuff out?
So, right. So, as was discussed, the Corporate Transparency Act and the Anti-Money Laundering Act were passed within the last 2 years. So, U.S. regulatory authorities are in process of rolling out the relevant rulemaking that's required under those pieces of legislation. So
The gentleman's time has expired.